started. We know that probably some other people will be joining us. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 7th and final, I can't believe I'm saying that, session in the Administrator Forum Series for the 2024-2025 school year. I wanted to let everyone know that these sessions are a collaboration between the Early Childhood Development Department at the Illinois State Board of Education and Early Child Professional Learning, also known as ECPL. And I'm Cindy Berry. I'm the Program Director for ECPL. Some of you may have attended the in-person conference we just held on April 1st. I wonder, maybe we could show hands as to who was there. I don't know. We can see that. Whether or not you were able to attend that conference, we hope you were able to join us. But if not, I did want to point out that we have a special section on our website. It's called the Workbench, and there's a section for administrators. So whether or not you were able to join us at that conference, you can go to that section on our website, and we're going to throw that link in the chat. There we go. Thank you, Karen. That'll take you directly to that special section just for you, where we have the conference handouts. We have the table talk resources that we had. We also will be posting there. We recorded 2 sessions from that conference, and those recordings of those sessions will be posted on that site, on that page on our site. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please be sure that your name in the participant list is the same first and last name you used to register for this session. We need this information for attendance purposes. If necessary, we ask that you please edit your name to ensure we are able to confirm your attendance. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be posted on the ECPL YouTube channel within the upcoming week, and we also posted on that Workbench site just for you. We have a large number of participants in today's webinar, so your microphones will be muted throughout the session. However, the chat will remain open for your comments, questions, and we're going to try to monitor that as best as we can. Please remain in the session to hear important announcements at the end. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Early Child Development Department consultant at the Illinois State Board of Education, Jenny Metcalf.
Thanks, Cindy. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Just want to say thank you again, as Cindy mentioned, for those of you who attended our conference in Champaign. It was so great to see all of you. Hope those of you who were in attendance got a lot out of the day. I also wanted to mention specifically, Cindy mentioned about that workbench. The very first slot PowerPoint in that workbench is the ISB presentation that was given at the beginning. And those slides have some really important information about FY26 and about the new early childhood agency. So if you weren't in attendance, I suggest you take a look at that PowerPoint. It's the very first one. It says opening session ISB. And now, without further ado, we will go to today's topic, which is the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. Many of you may have seen a lot of things happening out there from ISB regarding this plan. I think this might be the first webinar we've offered specifically for early childhood for this, so it's pretty exciting. We have Kimberly Johnson here. She's with the Standards and Instruction Department at ISB, and we hope this is really beneficial. So, Kimberly, take it away.
Thank you. And I will just preface that I'm in a very noisy room with very noisy background noise. So if you have issues hearing me, just put it in the chat or somebody try to flag me. It is the conditions I'm dealing with today. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation. I'm really excited to engage in this conversation, particularly with our early childhood community. This has been something that I know we have more work to do regarding literacy and how the supports that we offer for our early learning community. So excited to be here today and talk about that. I'm going to front load the conversation with an overview and just a lot of talking. Feel free, though, to drop anything in the chat. I will do my best to monitor that. And then Cindy or Jenny or Karen, anyone can monitor if there's something that pops up there. And then we will have time at the end for questions or more of a discussion. So if you have anything that, makes you wonder or have curiosities in terms of how this might connect to the work that you're doing, flag that and we can come back to that at the end. So as Jenny introduced, I'm Kim Johnson. I am the English Language Arts Principal Consultant at the Illinois State Board of Education in the Standards and Instruction Department. I do see some familiar names in the participant list, so you might have seen my face or seen my name in your inbox if you've signed up for our updates regarding the literacy plan. For the last 3 years, I have been working, I lovingly call the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan my child that I'm co-parenting with my co-worker, Kirsten Parr, my new director. But I have been at the agency now 7 years. Prior to that, I was a high school teacher, but I did do time working extensively with our preschool program as an instructional coach also. So have a little bit of experience there. Today's conversation, I just want to provide a really quick overview and kind of level set and explain what the comprehensive plan is, show you some resources that we have, and just engage in that conversation around what supports are needed and ways that we can work together. We'll talk about how you can engage with the plan. Again, I'll show you those supports and resources, and then we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. Okay, so before we get into looking at the plan, I think it's important to note the background and how we got here. So again, I've been at the agency for 7 years. In each year that I've been here, we've seen legislation bubbling up, talking about reading initiatives and trying to tackle literacy in one way or another. In 2022, we saw legislation that was actually probably going to take hold, and that's when we started to get serious about creating a plan. We were kind of late to the game in terms of state work by creating a statewide literacy plan, which had its benefits. But we really knew in 2022 that this was coming. Legislation was likely going to be passed. So in October of that year, we hosted a literacy summit. We had about 200, possibly a little more, educators and stakeholders gather in Bloomington to discuss literacy and what we needed, what teachers, what administrators, what higher ed individuals needed from us to better support our students. That was really the kickoff for the work around the literacy plan. We then saw that bill that I talked about, the Literacy and Justice for All bill, that was officially filed in the spring of 2023. And that at that same time, we started a writing group of about 20 individuals who had time to meet with us a lot over the course of about 6 weeks to put together the first draft of the literacy plan. My colleague Kirsten Parr often refers to this as we started really with the pens in the hand of the stakeholders, and we really did. So the words that ended up becoming the literacy plan really started from individuals who were passionate about literacy from all different walks. So we released the first draft in June of 2023, and then we engaged in our first round of listening tours. And that's where I recognized some participant names, either at a listening tour or maybe in our focus groups. And we really tried to be responsive to what the field said. So if you were with us through the journey of creating the literacy plan, you would see that the first draft that was released to the final draft, there were a lot of changes, and those changes were really indicated by the field. Then in the summer, we saw that the governor signed the law that Literacy, Justice, and for All bill then became Public Act 103-042. And this really guided the work that we were doing. So this mandated for us the creation of a literacy plan at the state level, and then also some additional mandates that I'll get to here in a couple slides. We then released draft 2 in October of 23 and engaged again in a listening tour, trying to hit multiple places throughout the state. Took that feedback, revised the draft one more time, and presented it to the board in January of 2024. So it was officially adopted by the Illinois State Board of Education, January 24th, 2024, and has since then, my focus in my job has been to help deliver the news about the literacy plan and to continue developing resources. So I will say this a couple of times throughout our talk today, but it's really important to note that public act that mandated the creation of the plan was a mandate on ISB, and that the plan itself is guidance and not governance. So there's no mandate for local districts. There's no requirement that local districts create a plan of their own. This is all, again, for ISB to create and create and release some resources going along with that. So we're hoping that the plan really emphasizes guidance over mandates. We know that mandates aren't always the most effective way to change instruction. We also hope that this really fosters innovation and responsiveness at the local level. And a huge push of the work that we've been doing has been diving into data and using the data that we have available and identifying the needs that we have in data to really make informed decisions about the type of instruction that we're providing. Okay, so this is the cover of the literacy plan that hopefully you've seen. If not, I'll provide a link here later in the presentation. But the purpose, again, is to align our state initiatives around literacy into one single focus, and to identify that for Illinois, we really do see literacy as an urgent priority. This isn't just the ability to read and write. This is really a social justice issue for all of our students. It's something that helps create strong literacy skills, leads to success. We know that there's so much research out there that shows correlations between low literacy skills and lifelong challenges. So we really do see that urgent priority. That, coupled with the learning loss that occurred during COVID and the pandemic, we know that this is something that we needed to address at a state level. So the purpose was to align that and provide a roadmap, not only for our state literacy initiatives, but also for districts who were engaging in this work and trying to revise and revamp their own literacy programs to meet the needs of their students. I'll also note that I think a foundation of the whole plan aligns with the idea of early literacy. And in the very beginning, the plan was referred to as the Early Literacy Plan. So you'll see a lot of overlap in conversation and discussion within the plan itself regarding the role of early literacy foundational skill development. These are the guiding values, and this was something that our drafting team put together at one of the very first meetings that we had, trying to identify what it is as a state that we believed in regarding literacy education. And that call to action is that we want Illinois education systems at all levels, higher ed, early childhood, K-12, and every supporting organization and institution to prioritize literacy as a fundamental goal and to recognize that it's essential for all of our students in all of our lives. Below here, we have these guiding values, these beliefs regarding every learner and their right to high access, inclusive, evidence-based instruction, that schools should nurture our students' unique assets and needs and honor their complexity within their own communities. We believe that every learner has the right to develop literacy in 2 or more languages. We believe that every learner has the right to be empowered through self-agency to advocate for their own needs, and also that they have the right to valid and reliable assessments. And these really guided our work as we created the literacy plan. So the plan itself is pretty extensive. Now, full disclaimer, I do not anticipate that people are reading this cover to cover unless you are a literacy nerd like me. It's 194, 96 pages total. So it's not a quick read. It's not short by any means, but it is really strategically organized and drafted to reflect the different needs that may exist within a school system. So we start with that vision and purpose that discusses kind of the why for doing this, the data at the state level that was driving the work, and the context for how we were creating this plan. We then dive into the biggest section of the plan, which is section 1, that talks about that evidence-based literacy instruction. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides, but this is where the bulk of information for classroom teachers will be found. This talks about what are those shifts that we're looking for? What is evidence-based instruction? What's explicit instruction? How might this type of instruction differ than what you might see previously in a school system? Then we move into professional learning and development. This focuses on how can we support teachers in our pre-service programs as well as in the regular school system, our in-service teachers and their professional learning needs. One thing that sets our plan apart from other states is that we really have taken an emphasis on trying to build the capacity of our leaders to support literacy and create a strong literacy program. So Section 3 is really geared at effective literacy leadership and the levers and the changes that are needed to support ongoing literacy gains and improvement. And then Section 4 is a workbook style section that helps local institutions create and draft their own plans. And then we also end on tools and resources. So moving into Section 1, we have 3 main goals for the plan, and each of the main sections focuses on a single goal. So Section 1 looks at really providing that framework for effective evidence-based instruction. As I mentioned earlier, this is the bulk of the plan. I think this is some 50 some odd pages, and it does provide different entry and exit points depending on your knowledge about literacy. So we were asked in our focus groups to provide kind of a summary, a primer for our leaders or for educators who may not feel as confident in understanding the science and history behind literacy development. So the very first part of Section 1 looks at that, the development of a reader. So this is where we cite our research. We talk about the different frameworks and the theory guiding this work. We give some suggestions for further reading. So this is great if you just would like to understand the theoretical backing. We then move into the literacy components. So we set forth a framework of 7 components of literacy. And we dive into those components and we talk about what this would look at different age levels and provide some resources there. And then, you know, this is really a good tool for our classroom teachers to think about, and anyone dealing with curriculum to think about how they're hitting these different components in an age appropriate way. We then move into connection to Illinois standards, and then we talk about also just evidence-based instruction in general, considerations for all learners, and our MTSS connections and tiers of evidence for evidence-based successful practices. So these are the 7 components. And if you're familiar with the National Reading Panel's report with the 5 pillars for literacy, you'll see that the middle pillars are the same. We essentially just added oracy at the very beginning and writing at the end. So the science and the backing as to what goes in, what are those components of literacy are still consistent, still reflect what we saw when I entered the field, you know, teaching in the early 2000s. So most of that information hasn't changed. We did feel the need to really strongly put an emphasis on oracy, and that's something that I think you'll see reflected, particularly in your early childhood communities, how important that skill is. We also saw it reflected for our multilingual communities to discuss the need for oracy and leveraging that as an equal skill to, say, fluency or word recognition or phonics. It is important to note that our plan is not a phonics only plan. That is not our approach to literacy. I'm hesitant to use the term balanced because balanced literacy is something that means something different in the world of literacy instruction. But really, the instruction should be balanced across these 7 components. It is based on what we know to be evidence-based, brain-based research for developing literacy skills. So it very much aligns with the science of reading in that approach, but it is not just a phonics only plan. For each of these components, and these you can find on pages 31 through 64 of the plan, you will find about a 4-page spread. And each component contains an overview, It talks about some assessment and intervention considerations. It lists some further reading, so different books, articles, podcast webinars that you might, engage in if you'd like to learn more about that specific component. We do have an ages and stages breakdown. This was one ask that we had from the field as we were developing to give like grade level performance expectations for each of these, and that's really hard to do. But we settled on this approach that kind of grade banded. And for your preschool programs, your young learners or early childhood learners would be reflected in that first stage. So we talk in general about some look-fors, some skills that we would expect to see at that age, with the disclaimer that we know the development of literacy skills does happen on a continuum and can look different for each individual student. We also have learning considerations to consider for our multilingual students, advanced learners, and our learners with specialized needs for each of these components as well. We also then go into discussing in section 1, a section that identifies just considerations to keep in mind for all students. So within that, we start to break apart some of those hot topic issues surrounding literacy. So we talk about culturally sustaining materials, high quality materials, how important it is to get books into the hands of our students that are reflective of all people. And different reading levels, and a different mix of styles and genres. We talk about the importance of print versus digital reading. Not that digital reading is not important, it very much is, but especially for our young early learners, how important it is to have tangible books in their hands and interact with a book. We talk about 21st century skills and the connection later to your K-12 ELA standards, as well as digital literacy and media literacy. We talk about content or disciplinary literacy, which is something that we'll see, all the way down into our early childhood, where we have students, engaging with different topics and conversations and starting to think about disciplines in a way that maybe aren't fully functionally formed yet, but that's also something that we see in our upper grades. We do discuss in length our multicultural learners or our multilingual learners. So we really emphasize in the ICLP the need for screening and instructional practices that are reflective and responsive to our multilingual students and bi-dialectical students. We do engage in a conversation that this is not an English only plan. This is to help build the skills of all of our learners. Also recognizing that this was from the Standards and Instruction Department. We do have a multilingual department at ISB, so we're supporting the work that they do, but just want to call out that this should align with the diversity of all children, every student that comes into our classrooms, and not just an English only approach. We do also emphasize specialized education needs, especially those that may be twice exceptionally identified. So within this section, we do talk about dyslexia, which is a common conversation, particularly at that transition from early childhood to your kindergarten classrooms, or your preschool classrooms to kindergarten, and the screening that might go along with that. We do have some guidance there. We also talk about advanced learners within that section. The bulk of section 1 then ends on a discussion around MTSS, which should really be the system, the structure that is guiding a lot of these decisions and a lot of the literacy planning that takes place. So the plan itself supports the MTSS framework. Again, we're encouraging the use of universal screeners at the beginning, and then continuing to use data to identify the needs of our students. And I think that that's something that's also represented in your Preschool for All programs. That can be kind of an overlap, a connection there. It is important to note that section 1 is really, while this talks about all those specialized groups, we talk about interventions, we talk about assessments, the bulk of the plan is really focused on our core tier 1 instruction. So it might not go into the depth that some of those interventionists or your specialized student populations need. Not to say that we don't have plans or the hope to build that out in the future, but the bulk of the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan is really focused on providing core Tier 1 instruction that aligns in evidence-based practices for the majority of our students. Okay, moving then into section 2, this is focused on our goal 2, which is every educator is prepared to continuously support and deliver high quality evidence-based instruction. And this was probably some of the most affirming and passionate conversations that I engaged in as we were creating the plan. Again, I was a high school teacher, but my first year in the classroom as a young, 23-year-old teacher, I realized how underprepared I was to meet the literacy needs of my students. I had not taken a reading methods course. I had really not been prepared in my undergrad. And we heard that same story from so many educators at all levels, not just even our elementary. And that is reflected in the plan or in the legislation that drove the creation of the plan. So we wanted to identify the needs here. We wanted to first speak to our ed prep programs to help them create meaningful change within their programs, to show alignment to the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan so that teachers are entering their classrooms feeling more prepared. But we also recognize that that's not something that can be done just in an ed prep program, and we wanted to support schools as they created their own training programs and provided professional learning. So within this, we took a two-prong approach. We do discuss educator preparation, and there's some additional criteria within the legislation that's guiding this work. We hope, or we will see by 2027, a stronger alignment for our elementary licensing content area test regarding the alignment to evidence-based practices, but we wanted to also engage in that conversation here for our ed prep programs. And this has been so inspiring to continue the work that we have with our ed prep programs. We have several different professional learning monthly virtual PLCs that take place where we get to engage in this work, and that connection and that relationship with K-12 and higher ed has been really beneficial. And then the second part of section 2 looks at in-service educators and what we can do to help deliver the most effective professional learning for our in-service teachers, how we can prioritize that, kind of the levers that we can pull and considerations we can think about when we're designing effective professional learning. And a lot of this looks at trying to shift from your old traditional sit and get, 1 hour workshop approach to now job embedded. So we're starting to see the rollout of some micro-credentials, another program that I handle here at ISB, which is a job embedded extended competency-based type learning program or learning professional learning setup. Then we move into section 3. Again, section 2 and section 3 are significantly shorter than section 1. And this is really geared at our leaders. So our school leaders, our administrators, our curriculum instructors, our teacher leaders, and anyone supporting the act of instruction in the classroom. And this really looks at trying to raise the capacity of our leaders to offer, to create, maintain, sustain equitable conditions for high quality evidence-based literacy instruction. So we're trying to help, we heard from the field, we heard from administrators saying, I don't have a background in literacy. I don't know what I'm looking for when I go into the classroom. So we're really trying to speak to them in this section. And this is something that is, I would say, unique for our Illinois plan as opposed to what other states are. We really tried to start with raising the bar, building capacity for our building leaders and our district leaders. Section 4 is a workbook style section. So this is great to use if you are in the process of writing a literacy plan or revising a literacy plan. This has workbook style questions to go through as a team. This would be great to use with a PLC. And it really helps to to formulate your thoughts, collect some data, put some discussion notes down that then would lead into the creation of a local literacy plan. And here are some examples of those questions. So things like identifying the strengths and weaknesses currently that exist within literacy within a system-wide approach. And I would say that our plan does really try to speak from creating a literacy program that is reflective of the whole experience, so pre-K through 12, and even post-secondary goals. But it can also be implemented at a grade banded level. So even bringing together preschool instructors to think about, or early childhood, and the transition from maybe a pre-K to a K classroom, and the different needs that exist there. The last part of our literacy plan looks at the tools and resources. And this is maybe not as extensive as I would like it to be, but did take a lot of time. There are so many, and since the release of the plan, there have been so many additional resources that I would love to add, but we haven't had the chance to update this section yet. So at the very end of the plan, we do have a glossary. We discussed in our first drafting session how just the semantics of, identifying what literacy is and what does that mean, and the words that we use to define literacy and reading and writing really varies person to person. So it was important that we're speaking the same language. So we do have a glossary included at the end. And then otherwise we go by section within the tools and resources. And we really had to limit this to resources that existed that were free and aligned to standards, aligned to the plan, and really tried to limit this to what exists currently with ISB departments. Again, there have been additional creations since then, but this is not an extensive list. This is not exhaustive. Going then to our website, which I'll link here in a second. We also have additional tools that were not included in the original release, but have been released since then. So the first one that we offer is our Getting Started Toolkit. And this is as complete as possible of a toolkit to help anyone have an on-ramp into working with the plan. So we provide some overview resources. This includes just a really short executive summary. I think it's 2 pages long, so you can get a gist of what is in the plan and what it says. And this is really helpful if you're speaking to stakeholder groups that don't have the time. I mean, who has the time to read 194 pages right now? But this really condenses it down. We have a legislative fact sheet that explains the public act that drove the creation of this plan, and what mandates existed for us for ISB. We have a frequently asked questions document about the literacy plan. At the very top of that list is a local literacy plan required? Absolutely not. That's a mandate for us, not you. And then we have that implementation checklist. So this could give you a sense of where your district or where your program might be in implementing a strong literacy program. We then move into first step resources. So if you are just starting the creation of a plan, you don't currently have one in place, or maybe yours is 15, 20 years old and you'd like to update that, we recommend starting with this asset mapping template. Nowhere in our discussion as we created the literacy plan did we intend for districts to completely abandon what they were doing. This is not an idea of like throw the baby out with the bathwater and we need to start new. Chances are, I would venture to say that this is factual for everyone, there are really strong strengths for each of your approaches to literacy that we can build upon. And then identifying the areas of need that exist within your programs, within your district, helps with that asset mapping. And this doesn't just look at district assets, it also looks at the community. So maybe you have a really strong early literacy program that exists in your community that you could connect with, or a strong library program. So identifying some of those connecting resources. We also have a data literacy information sheet, and a soon to be released ebook that looks at doing a deep dive into the data that exists and how you can use that data to help drive instruction. And data we know looks different at every level. So you guys at the preschool level may have very, very different data sources than what we see in the elementary level, and preparing, our students to take those types of screeners or benchmarking assessments. And that looks different than what we see at the high school level. So this is really trying to identify what data sources you have and how to utilize those to make instructional decisions or to improve the literacy program overall. We also discuss reader's guides. So this is a great tool to get into the plan if you'd like to engage with it, but you don't know where to start or don't feel like all of the plan speaks to you. You can find your role within the reader's guide, and there is a personalized roadmap through the plan. We pull out all the workbook questions that are reflective at the end of each section. We suggest the reading path through it. So there's a lot of different options. We recognize that if you are a community and family member, you might not need to have the same type of reading experience as you go through the plan. We do have posters. One is the literacy standards for endorsement in elementary education. These standards have not changed. We just think they're really good standards and they are aligned with evidence-based practices. So we wanted to emphasize those and highlight those. So we put them in a poster form that's downloadable. We also have our 7 components of literacy poster. And on this, we offered that continuum for the kind of ages and stages and skills that you might see from birth through college and career ready. Since then, we did have additional mandates to release additional resources. The first was being a literacy plan template. This is just a template for districts to use. It is not mandated, it is not required. But if you're a district that doesn't have a plan or would like to start new, you can find a template on our website. We also have released, we have our curriculum evaluation tool, which might not be as applicable for preschool programs, but in our elementary programs, if you're evaluating new curriculum, school-wide, we have a tool that was released in 21, and we created a literacy-specific addendum to that. We also have released some literacy coaching guidance and then some supports for our multilingual, bidialectical, and even our newcomer students, as many schools have seen an influx of newcomers and need additional supports. So here's just some screenshots so you can get a sense of what these resources look like. The screening information is one that I would note, particularly from the early childhood perspective, because screening is something that, again, we continue to see legislation bubble up about screening. And we continue to engage in conversations, particularly with early literacy and the need for screening in early literacy programs. And then these are the reader's guides. Again, we have one for every kind of reader experience. And we have in the works in the future, hopefully some additional reader's guides will be released with more specialized topics. And these are those posters. So you can see, hopefully, I know it's tiny, but these are the 7 components of literacy. This is the continuum of skills that you would expect to see birth through college and career ready for each of those 7 components. And these are generalized, but they're just some look-fors that we would expect to see, in an early childhood program. What should students be displaying to be on track with oracy skills? Again, this is not a set expectation. We're just trying to see the continued improvement and growth in literacy throughout. And you'll see for each of these, even as we go into like phonological awareness or fluency, we don't master this ever. So we're laying the groundwork to continue to build those skills. And there's things that we can do at every level to make us more successful. I see in the chat a question about screener recommendations. So Illinois is a local control state, and that gives us some limitations as to what recommendations we can give. So we currently, as a state, do not have any recommendations for specific curriculum, screeners, assessments, other than our state mandated assessments. However, there are some states that do have that mandate. And if legislation here is passed in Illinois, then that would be something that we would release. We currently don't have that, but I do have connections with local professional development providers who could provide some guidance on what screeners would be most effective. So that's something that we could chat about later. All right, this is just the view of the template. Again, this is for a resource to help districts. This is not mandated. This is not something that anyone needs to complete. We do have a current grant that is accepting applications. So if you're in a district, you may be engaged in that conversation around submission for that. This is not required. You can have your local literacy plan, and the grant itself is not required, but it is an opportunity for some additional funding. This is the rubric that goes along with our curriculum evaluation tool. And I do believe that the presentation was sent out yesterday, so you should have links to some of these resources within that presentation too. But if not, I can add those to the chat later. And then we have our literacy coaching guidance. So this was created with afterwards and part of the legislation after we released the plan to help support instructional coaches and our reading specialist and anyone engaged in the coaching role and what that might look like and what effective literacy coaching looks like and some resources to help guide that. And then we just released, and it's a large focus on early childhood, so it's a great free professional learning resource, but we just released literacy modules that are aligned to the Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. It's titled What the Research Says. It's effective reading instruction for all students. It comes out to about a 12 to 15-hour course. But there's modules and all of the modules are now free. I forgot to update this slide. They're all available. It's 16 modules total. It was originally written from the perspective of early childhood. It's a great introductory course into evidence-based literacy instruction, and you can kind of go at your own pace. I will note we aren't rostering students for this. We do ask you to register and we send you the link to it, but it won't track your progress because that would involve individual registrations or rostering for each person. And unfortunately, we didn't have the funding for that. But this is still good if you can possibly turn it into your local districts for professional development requirements. We have local ROEs that are engaged in organizing cohorts, but this is a great place to start. It's free. It does build then if you were to join like a letters cohort or an Ames pathway cohort, it's very much aligned with that type of instruction. We currently have, I think, over 2,000 educators who are engaged in that, and we've heard really positive feedback. So this is just a overview of the work that we've done since releasing the plan. And all of this was outlined and mandated by the legislation. So July 1st of 2024, we released that rubric, the template, and guidance on literacy coaches. We then, January 1 of this year, released those literacy modules that are free for educators. And now we're currently working with our educator effectiveness department to continue that transition of the content area test for our elementary education, grades 1 through 6, their content area test, to evidence-based practices in alignment with our Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. We are preparing for the creation and release of a subscore of that test that's specific to language and literacy that will be published to show how different educator preparation programs are preparing, how successful they are at preparing their students in language and literacy. So there's a community of practice going on, and they're currently engaged in that work to do that transition, have a rubric to evaluate their programs, and just overall engaging in professional learning monthly, I believe, to improve their programs. So that's been really exciting. And just to give you kind of a reflection of the phases of our plan and our engagement, this really takes place from January to the present day. So our phase 1 was just trying to build awareness. We constantly revisit this phase 2 because we know that there's a lot of audiences that have not heard about the plan yet and aren't aware that it exists. So we're here and we want to make you aware of it. We then went into really focusing on helping districts identify or build their data literacy skills, identify the data sets that are going to be most helpful for them in developing strong local literacy programs, in identifying the gaps in their data and what they could do to fill those gaps. So we've had some capacity builders sessions. That's our monthly webinar series that we have recordings on our website. We have an ebook that we're working on. We really engaged in some targeted professional learning on this topic. Phase 3 has then been professional learning that we're shifting to now is professional learning on evidence-based instructional practices. So we release those modules. We're continuing to support districts in engaging in this plan by creating their own plans and really auditing the literacy practices that they use within their districts. We have plans for next year, releasing a capacity builders series, that professional learning community online geared at evidence-based practices for our classroom teachers. So this is where we're at currently in the works, along with phase 4, that alignment with educator prep programs. And that is the bulk of the presentation. I did want to open it up to you guys for what questions you have and engage in any sort of discussion. And while you're doing that, I wanted to show you some resources on our website. So feel free. I'm not sure if you guys are able to come off mute or put in the chat, but feel free if you have any questions to let me know. And I am going to take you to our website also. Okay, yes, everyone is able to come off of mute. So feel free, super informal here. If you have any questions or wonderings or are curious about the connection of the plan, I know that was a lot of information that I threw at you, but happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay, while you're thinking about that, I just wanted to show you how to get to this page. So if you go to our isb.net, and I'll also provide the direct link in the chat, and you go to standards and instruction. Here's my department's website, and up at the top, we see Illinois Comprehensive Literacy Plan. And this website is continuously updated. So if you're ever looking for the most up-to-date information regarding the literacy plan or our resources, this is where you would find it. So currently you'll see this is information on the District Literacy Plan Implementation Grant. This was a formula grant that is available for every public school district and ROE classified by the RCDT codes in Illinois to help support the creation, revision, or if those are done, implementation of your local literacy plan. The deadline is fast approaching. So if you're in a district and would like to do this, it's something, it is a very easy application. We do have plans to roll this out and expand access to that for additional entities next year, assuming we receive the same allocation. On this page, we have links to some professional learning. So this is where you'll see that professional learning modules. I also will be updating this page later today with a link to a discussion group that we have where we have a short presentation for about an hour and then a 30-minute conversation. This will take place on May 1st, and the topic is on translanguaging. and our multilingual considerations for all students. So something to consider joining. I'll have more information later to provide. Links to information about the legislation that's driving this work, links to the actual acts, as well as the legislative fact sheet. We have those tools and resources that I talked about in the Getting Started toolkit, as well as the additional resources that we've released. And then we have some links to professional learning that we've given, recorded conversation or recorded presentations that are very similar to what you all experienced. Here is Capacity Builders. So this is that monthly webinar that we give. This is really geared currently at administrators, leaders. It takes place during the school day. So oftentimes our classroom teachers aren't able to join us, but the recordings are here. But we really wanted to focus on the leaders for the first round. You can view our past sessions and the topics, the presentations, the recordings. You can also register for our remaining two. We have our next one coming up on the 8th of May. So this is a great opportunity to engage with individuals who are dealing with literacy and thinking about literacy within their own context. We have a wide variety from educator prep, higher ed individuals, as well as our school district leaders. This is information about that higher ed community of practice and their recording, and we'll have some resources posted there. And then we also have a way to stay connected. So we have a literacy landscape survey, and this is really beneficial if you'd like to provide some just feedback for us on the needs that you have regarding literacy. This is open to everyone. I do use this quite frequently to gauge my next steps with literacy support, so highly welcome responses there. You can sign up for a literacy listserv here. I don't spam you, I try not to, but I do share out updates as we have them released. And we do have office hours that meet. We have another one planned for the 12th of May, meet monthly to just answer questions that may exist or brainstorm. We love to be thought partners with what's happening in the districts. And if you are interested in the development of this plan, would like to see former, our former drafts, you can see all of that information here.
Kimberly, can I interject? There's a question in the chat, and I also want to sort of maybe elaborate for you on this. It says, will this plan be used for group daycare homes? Some of our grantees here are in child care centers. So can you speak at all to how that could be used if they're not part of a district?
Yeah. So that was actually part of our conversation as we drafted the plan. We heard from so many individuals saying, especially with early literacy skills, the need to embed that into the community. So within each of the workbook sections, there is a section for community and family engagement, and that's where you'll probably see in the workbook sections appear at the end of each section. But that's where you would see questions that would help address like your home daycare programs, or even pediatricians and healthcare providers, or anyone supporting literacy, our community librarians. How can they help align with the programs that are happening in your local districts? So there are resources available, and it is used in the sense as much as relevant for your program. So if you have really strong connections with your local district and you're, engaged in those conversations, or a really strong connection with your local early literacy programming, that would be something that I think you're one step ahead. If you're in a home daycare type setting and you're wondering about how to improve literacy programming and just how to align better with your local districts, then this would be a great starting place to give you some action steps to think about alignment. And that would be the community and family engagement, or community and family readers guide would be a good resource there. Yeah, ROEs are available to apply for that grant. And we've had several ROEs. I can't say 100% of them have applied, but many of them have. Yeah, and with the question about more targeted. So we started this out again with the focus on trying to address tier 1 core instructional needs for K-12, but we've identified that the work is not done there at all. So we do have the hopes of continuing and providing more resources. That's where I could use input from all of you in terms of what types of supports are needed, what types of programming needs, professional development needs, what are the things that would be most helpful and relevant to guide the work that you're doing. We would like to start shifting that focus now that we've rolled out the plan, met the legislative deadlines. Now I can focus on some more of those specialized groups. So early childhood, we are also looking at expanding for our upper grades and content area literacy as well.
I really have a question.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, your notation of having some other areas of focus, especially early childhood. So a question I have is that something where I would love to give some feedback just on the needs that we're seeing when we serve both school districts and community-based childcare? So I've seen a lot of success with some focus groups. I don't know if that's something, but I think there'd be a lot of, there's a lot of familiar names on here. I think there's a lot of individuals who'd be willing to give a little bit of time to provide some of that feedback. And I think it'd be very much appreciated. Because there's a lot of great content. Our team read through the plan, and so we were trying to flush through, are there some things we need to revisit as a program? So that's just some 2 cents that I have found to be kind of successful with getting some feedback.
I love that idea, and I am totally on board for that. And that's something we could talk about either, and I'll put my email here in the chat in just a minute. I'm also wondering if it's not something that we could, like Cindy, maybe could help organize or leverage that for us as well, but would love to engage in that discussion because I'm not an expert in this area, and you guys are boots on the ground working there every day. So would love to hear what's going to be the most beneficial for it. It's a small and mighty team here at ISB. I'm the only full-time literacy person. And then my director, who was just promoted to that position, she was my other counterpart. So I appreciate any guidance and feedback and would love to have that. A focus group would be great.
And I'll just interject, Kimberly and Natalie, thank you for those questions, because when Kimberly and I met to discuss this session, she is so supportive of this. And so we were talking about this as kind of just an initial introduction to the literacy plan. And what Kimberly was saying to me, like, I'm just open to anything that will help us develop resources and share this information across the early child education and care setting. So Kimberly and I will definitely have a conversation after this to discuss that idea. So thank you, Natalie, for that. And I just want to acknowledge that, Kimberly, you are all open to whatever we need. You're willing to help us to try to meet the needs of our programs and our early childhood educators. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it, if there are resources that you currently use, and things that we could highlight, I do try to send information out via the listserv, but there are different messaging opportunities. So maybe you've engaged in professional learning that has been really helpful around the literacy world for your specific program. And that might be something that's not on my radar. So I would love to learn about what's the most useful, what unique needs you guys have, and then can start to create a game plan for resources that can support that work. Additional questions or thoughts?